This presentation is presented by Free Korean Dogs, and we are a registered Canadian charity with a focus on freeing Korean dogs from primarily the dog meat trade and other at-risk circumstances in Korea. So founded in 2015, we have since shut down 3 dog meat farms. We currently have just over 100 dogs, I think, in sanctuary in Korea while they work on rehabilitation and getting physically and mentally well before adoption. And this work is made possible by our volunteer team of board of directors and a ton of very dedicated volunteers and adopters across Toronto, Toronto, Vancouver, US cities like Portland, LA, Seattle, and of course, South Korea. And in addition to rescue work, we also aim to promote a lot of awareness and education just on topics surrounding the dog meat trade and busting myths on rescue dogs, educating on pet ownership and other such topics, which brings us here today with Madhvi. She is a dog mom, first and foremost, of rescue dogs, a rescue advocate. She has 2 FKDs. Some may argue 3 because Maisie might count as 2 pups.
Exactly.
And also a dog trainer. Yeah. So I will let Madhvi do her introductions first. Let me just, again, bear with me. Can we see that slide?
Perfect.
Perfect.
So, hello, everybody. So my name is Madhvi Chona, and I am a positive reinforcement dog trainer. So first of all, as Sarah had mentioned, I have 3 pups of my own. So I have Ollie, who is the furthest in the picture, and he is going to be 15 in October, and we got him when he was 9 months old, and he is from a local rescue here. And then we have Benji, who we got at about a year and a half, and he's going to be 8 actually in July. And he is our nervous Nelly of pups. And then, of course, we have the wild child, Maisie, who is going to be 2 in May, and we got her at 7 months. So a little bit about my credentials. So I have a certification in crucial concepts in dog behavior through the Ian Dunbar their association. I also have a certification in dog training foundations by Karen Pryor Academy, and I have certifications in dog nutrition as well as canine first aid. I've also done a 1-year apprenticeship at Positive Plus Academy. So there we did, a lot of puppy classes and adolescent classes, but we also did a lot of behavioral modification, reactivity, and agility. So learned a lot in that 1 year for sure with the hands-on. And currently, I am working at the Oakville Milton Humane Society as a volunteer dog trainer, and I work with high-level dogs, getting them into lower levels so that they are more accessible and easily adopted, as well as, of course, working with several rescues on their training needs, and, of course, Free Korean Dogs being one of my favorites since I have 2 pups from them as well, too. So, yeah, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, Madhvi is the person that has the answers when I don't, in short.
Yeah.
So before we jump into it, just a few housekeeping items. We are going to do question and answer, but we're going just to make sure that we're not sidetracking ourselves during the presentation. We're going to wait until the end. And the way you can ask questions is on your lower right corner, there is an icon that says activities. It has a triangle, a square, and a circle. If you click there, the 3rd one down is a Q&A, and you can feel free to type your questions there, and we will be monitoring and answering them. So just getting into the presentation, I know last month we did another webinar on training foundations, which more geared towards talking about the relationship and building a positive relationship with your pup so that you could be successful with training. And today we're sort of diving into more of the common rescue behaviors that I'm sure it's compiled between me, our post-adoption advising team, and Madhvi, of all the common questions that we get and the common concerns and issues that people come to us with. But before we do that, I think a very important thing is just to understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
So Madhvi, if you want to
tell us a
little bit about that.
Yeah, so basically getting to the root of the behavior. So what this actually says is that beneath every behavior, there's a feeling, and beneath every feeling, there's a need. And when we meet that need, rather than focus on the behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. So this basically, in a nutshell, is sort of taking a behavior. So let's just take barking, for instance. So a dog is barking. So when a client comes to me and says, my dog is constantly barking, how do I stop that? So, well, we need to know why the dog is barking. So that's good. Figure out what the cause of that is. So is the dog barking because it's alerting us of potential danger? Now, danger to us and danger to them are two different things. So they may be thinking the smallest thing is a threat, and they'll bark on that. So, is it alert barking? Is it boredom? Oftentimes dogs just bark because they don't have enough stimulation, whether it's lack of exercise or lack of mental stimulation. So is that the cause? Because that's an easy fix as well. Are they barking because they're excited? They're excited to see you. They're excited to see, people around, and they're using their voice to show that excitement. It could be also pain. So are they in pain? So once we sort of get to figure out what the cause of the problem is, then we can actually work towards, rectifying that problem.
Okay, and so going to some of the common problems, and I think this is probably our number one.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So the importance of decompression, this is like so important, not just for new pups, but also for just, dogs that have come into a new environment, dogs that have, are just relatively just skittish on the whole. So the first two things, routine and consistency, are so important. So, we want to, and not just for new pups that are coming here, adopted or, rescued or shelter pups. This is like routine for the dogs that we have currently as well too, because they're creatures of habit. So the more that we can give them routine and consistency, the better it is for them, and they'll just flourish, and they'll be way healthier. So routine and consistency, super important for that. So we want to keep their meal times around the same time. We want to take them out for walks and for at the same time. We want to give them their dinner at the same time. We want to do mental stimulation at the same time, so that they build a routine, and that will help them decompress. That's one of the biggest things. Giving them a safe space. So that's also super important. So a space that is away from maybe somewhere like a kitchen or near a TV, near, where there's going to be like loud noises and music. We want them to have a space that they can actually go to, that's their space, where it's quiet and they are able to sort of calm themselves down. Something else I should just sort of say, the importance of decompression, just the title. Decompression, for those who don't know what it is actually allowing a pup to calm down. So, allowing them that space to calm down. So that's sort of like when we say, we want the dog to decompress, is that we want them to go to an area, and we want them to we want to help them calm down. So the other thing is presence, but also respect and consent. So as far as presence being, is that we want to be there, but we don't want to be in their face. And also, especially if it's a new pup, and we've given them an area, and we've given them their space, we don't want to be going into their space and invading their space, because, oh my God, what's happening? Are they going to come out? Are they going to eat? We want to allow them to just sort of be on their own, and they will actually come out when they're ready to. And we want to give them that space. We don't want to be going into their space. We want them to come into our space. So we want to do that. And, as far as consent goes, I'll talk about that a little bit later as well too, but in one of the other slides, but it's so important to ask for consent, but that's going to be probably when they're ready to actually come and be pet. And of course, giving them a controlled environment. So that meaning that when we get them out, they're not going to just sort of have free reign of the home. We want them to, I'm a huge fan of baby gates. So, we put baby gates there, and we give them a small area where they have their either their crate or their bed. They have a pee pad, they have their food and their water, and then we gate it so that they have their own little area and their own space. And as they get more confident, we can remove the baby gates or expand the baby gates for that. So.
And what do you, I mean, I feel like a lot of information out there says dogs need socialization. Puppy socialization, especially important, especially in their early days. How do we balance that with a new dog and not sort of let them sink into isolation? Especially for dogs that, like our dogs, are so used to being around other dogs and used to having volunteers around them a lot, whether they like it or not, but it's what they're used to.
So usually with another, if they have a sibling that's going to be in the home, that's actually good. They're pack animals, so they will definitely gravitate towards the dog before they'll gravitate towards the human. So that part is fine. But I think for a lot of these dogs, when they come and we want to just sort of, expect so much out of them in the beginning, we want to take things in steps. So for instance, like if they do have a playmate, or if they have a sibling there, then absolutely introduce them to the sibling. And if they are comfortable, you can actually see if they can put their beds close by, so that they can actually bond that way. If sometimes it takes a while for a dog that's super nervous to even acknowledge the other sibling, and we want to give them that space as well too. Eventually they will. Sometimes it just takes time, but they will definitely, if it's a sibling, they will definitely gravitate towards them before they gravitate towards the human, and they'll gravitate towards a female before they gravitate towards a male. So there's steps to everything, and I think the biggest thing is that we just want to take things slow, and we want to sort of gauge them and see how they are behaving, and then take the steps according to how they're behaving.
What about for dogs that are not good with other dogs?
So then, that being said, then if there is a sibling dog that's there, then that could, cause a little bit of problems, obviously. But most dogs, they will learn to coexist. I think if there are two dogs, and one is sort of, if your dog is the one that you currently have is a bit more aggressive and is sort of getting into the other pup's face, the new pup's face, we want to have a separation for them for a little while, and then gradually introduce them. So we don't want to be, as soon as the dog comes into our home, we want to open up the crate and then, get the other dog there right away. We want to actually do it in steps, so that, we introduce maybe through a baby gate first, see how they do. And then if they do get along, then you can sort of move it. If you find that the body language is saying that no, they're not getting along, especially, then we want to give the new dog the space on its own without the other dog being there. So the other dog would have to go into, I usually suggest that they go into a different area, so that it doesn't cause the other dog to regress back during their decompression time.
Okay. So that sort of ties into the next slide, trigger stacking, which is, I find, very much related to the decompression stage. And you and I both get a lot of emails saying he was great during the first 2 weeks, and now he's kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
We did this, and all of a sudden he was upset.
Yeah. So usually it's about 5 weeks. They can tolerate about 4 to 5 weeks, and then it's all of a sudden it's like, what happened? Our dog has regressed. Our dog has got behavior problems. Mm-hmm. And when we sort of figure out what's the cause of it and what's happened, then that's where you kind of realize. So what trigger stacking is, that we're introducing too much stimuli to already a pup that's anxious, and we're introducing it way too fast. So, this slide's, using a busy street and then adding on traffic and other dogs and new people. But you could also be having, something is like, all of a sudden you got a blender going, then you got a vacuum going, then you have, you're going to take the pup for a walk on one side of the street, then you're taking the pup on the other side, then you're meeting people. then the fire engine comes. So all these things, they take it, they take it, they take it, and then all of a sudden they just they can't take anymore, and then they explode. And that's when you'll sort of see the behavior problems. You'll see a huge regression, and it's like, oh my God, I had this perfect dog that was awesome, that was, you know, doing everything right, and all of a sudden now the dog is like, you know, hiding. And that's usually what it is. It's because we didn't decompress them properly, and we did not see their signals, and we introduced them to too many things way too fast. So that's why routine and consistency is so important for that. So allowing them that space. And decompression for some dogs may take 2 weeks, some may take a few months. So we have to go on their timeline, and we have to have that patience for that, for sure.
So how do we know when to go and when to stop, so to speak, with trigger stacking? I mean, again, we want them to have certain exposures and desensitization, but how do we know if we're sort of moving too fast or doing too many triggers at once? Of course, this is all inadvertently. With desensitization, we're doing this in sort of controlled by environment and not setting them up to fail.
Yeah.
But
so oftentimes the body language, I mean, that's a huge indication. So, you know, when we're taking them on a busy street, for instance, and they're, you know, they're kind of stopping, they're looking, they're sniffing a lot. And then we also then introduce them to something else. And it's like, oh my God, now they're lip licking, they're yawning, so when we can read their body language and we're saying, okay, well, that's, you know, a confident dog will, you know, you'll know if there's a confidence in a dog, that they don't, you know, they'll walk in a different way. But if you're sort of, you know, if you're having a dog that's not that confident, not that sure of themselves, and we're introducing them to more and more things, you'll have an idea for sure as to that I might be going too fast with it, right? So that's why I'm saying that there's no real like limit as to how long it takes. For some dogs, like I said, it could, you know, they could be walking, you know, on a harness in, you know, next day, where other dogs may take a couple of months to get into a harness because of their fear and everything else. So we just, like, it's one of those things where we want, and that's why it's so hard to say, you know, I want them to learn all these new experiences, but then at the same time, we have to make sure that they are ready for those new experiences. And you'll know, I think as you know, as time goes on, and the dogs are approaching you, you know, they're more comfortable with you, you know, and then you can, you know, start maybe introducing them to one person, see how that goes. And if that works out, then that's fine. Keep that one person consistent for a little while, but don't then at that point, oh, they love this one person, I'm going to introduce them to a few more people. So that's oftentimes what happens, is that they don't take it slow enough, that they just say, okay, well, I'm going to take, you know, now that they love people, by the assumption that, oh, they love my friend. And then that's when the regression happens. So we have to be really mindful of that. And a lot of it, you can, you know, once you are able to read their dog's body language, you can tell a lot.
What would you say is the main body language that people overlook? I mean, if you have a dog with like curled up body language, tail in between its legs, ears pinned back, you know that's a nervous dog.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not all.
No.
Not obvious.
Yeah. You know what? The most common is lip licking and yawning. Very common. So, you know, even though they seem okay, they're like, you know, they're lying down or they're with that person, but they're licking their lips on a constant basis, they're yawning, you know that there's some anxiety there. So at that point, we want to sort of, you know, get them away from the triggers, so that they aren't going to be experiencing more anxiety. You know, at that point, you know, something that's a calming thing, like I love Kongs. So, you know, giving them a Kong and giving them their safe space, just to help them calm themselves down. And then when they're ready to come back out, they can.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So also nature versus nurture.
Yeah. So nature is the genetics, right? So, and then nurture is their past experiences and the environment. So when we're looking at nature, we're looking at the breed of the dog. So what they were traditionally bred to do. So for instance, you know, I know a lot of the the adopters have Jindos, and they're working dogs, right? So for something like that, if you try to make them into a couch potato and don't, exercise them enough and things like that, then you're going to see some behavioral problems, and you're going to see that very, very quickly. So what we want to do is look at the breed of the dog, and then accordingly, exercise them, or use that, so that that they're able to do what they were bred to do. So we want to, if it's a Jindo, we want to take them on walks, and we want to go and play fetch with them outside. We want put them in agility courses, so things like that. That's going to do commands, because that also helps with mental stimulation. So doing things like that to keep them active and not bored. And then taking another one, I'll use Win as well too. So Win, we had him. We were fostering him. Yeah, the foster dog. For it was supposed to be for 2 days, but we couldn't let him go. He's too cute. So Win was with us for about a little bit over 2 months, and so he is a Welsh Corgi. And so with him, the previous owner had said that that he's keeping us hostage, and he's aggressive, and he's biting at our ankles, and he's not letting us go out and things like that. But if you look at the breed of the Welsh Corgi, they're herders. So if they're herders, then what's happening is, what he's trying to do is keeping his herd, which in this case, there's no livestock, it's the humans, safe. So he's not letting them go out. So that's why he's nipping at the ankles and stuff like that. So if you make a big deal about going out, then of course he's going to do his job. So if you just sort of learn what the behaviors are, and then of that breed are, and then you can actually modify the way you act with that dog, right? So, and once we were able to do that and just sort of slightly go away, everything was fine with Win, right? So and then the second part of this is the environment and the past experiences. So of course, so even though the dog may be one of those dogs that are a bit more alpha-ish, the environment and their past history as to what they've endured will also change their mannerism as well too. So you may have a Jindo that's very confident, or you may have a Jindo that's super skittish and won't even come near you because they're just so fearful. So you have to sort of do your full research. So it's not just the breed; you have to sort of take both the breed and the environment together when you make that decision about adopting or fostering.
Yeah, and I would say that's we had I'm sure a lot of people know Great. She was a beautiful Great Pyrenees, spent 5 years, I think, in Korea in the shelter just because she was too big to fly. But she would have been a horrible livestock guardian because she spent so long in that boarding house that everyone that came in, she was friendly with.
Yeah.
And she did not like cats, which was probably part of her breed. But gosh, she was cute.
Yeah.
Moving on. So, all that being said, where do we begin?
Okay, so what we need to know before we begin behavior modification. So for behavior modification, that is something like taking a behavior that is an unwanted behavior and then making it manageable. So through positive reinforcement. So, using things like desensitization and counter conditioning and shaping. I'm a big fan of shaping as well too. So for those who don't know what counter conditioning and desensitization and shaping are, so I can just briefly go over that. So what that is that, so counter conditioning and desensitization are similar, but the difference is, so for instance, if your pup is afraid of fireworks, say, so then what we want to do is to counter condition that with something positive. So we want to play some music, some fireworks in the back, on a YouTube, and we're going to be actually feeding it high value treats. So what we're doing is something that's scary is now being also with something which is yummy. And then the difference between that and desensitization is that they haven't heard that sound before, but we know that they're probably going to be scared of it. Like a vacuum is very common, fire engines, police car sirens, all these things are super scary for dogs, as well as thunder. So what we want to do is play those noises in the background, at a low volume, and then eventually make it higher and higher. But at the same time, we're feeding the pup high value, so that they're listening to the sounds, but they're also being fed. So when they actually hear that sound, I already know what that sounds like, and I've got a positive association towards that versus a negative one. So that's what that is. And
Yeah,
shaping.
yeah, sorry, but I was just going to say, Madhvi, you're a huge fan of lick mats because it helps reduce stress levels. It helps prolong the session. All around good.
And I'm a huge fan of freezing stuff, so that way it lasts even longer. So these are all things. The more that a dog licks, the calmer they get, because licking is calming for them. So the more that we're able to help calm them down, that's going to help their anxiety, and that's going to build their confidence up as well too, right? So and then lastly, about the shaping. Shaping is actually, I'm also a big fan of that. And what that is I use that a lot when we're doing like place, going to their place, going to their bed. And what that is that we're allowing the dog to make the right decision. So every time the pup is going towards, we're not going to say anything. We're going to let them make that decision. So when they come to the bed, we're going to sit by the bed. When they come to the bed and they actually put a paw on the bed, we're going to toss a treat on the bed. When they put two paws on the bed, we're going to toss another treat on the bed. When they sit on the bed, it's like, okay, so they're thinking, okay, wait a minute. The more I get to the bed, the more I'm getting treats. So I'm going to keep going on the bed. And the minute that they lie down on the bed, that's when we're going to jackpot them. And it's all going to be not hand fed, but it's all just going to be just tossing a few treats on the bed for them. So they understand, wait a minute, if I go on the bed, I get one treat, but if I lie on the bed, I get a lot of treats. So I'm going to keep lying on that bed. And then we actually then with that, we also then add the word place or settle or bed. But that works. So it's such an effective way because we're actually allowing the dog to make their own choice. So those are the three things that are used commonly for behavior modification. And then of course the natural instincts of the dog. So as far as what if they're prey driven, we're never going to be able to take that drive away from them. But what we can do is manage that drive, and that's what we want to do. Is we want to be able to manage their natural instincts so that they're not and reduce their level of that, right? So and then how they learn and what motivates them. So is it food? Is it a toy? Is it just you petting them? Is it your voice, actually? Because that's also very powerful, especially if the pup is very attached to you. So it's really, really, you can use your voice if nothing else is motivating for them, but then you can, use their voice, the excitement and, calming and things like that. So you can use that also as part of that as well, too. Understanding body language is so important. And that's one of the things that one of the first things that I teach, the clients is that if you can understand their body language, a lot of the stuff will become like second nature, that you'll know, okay, the dog needs its own space now. Okay, the dog's really anxious right now. Let's just give them a calming advice and settle them. I always say that no dog will bite you without giving notice, 100%. So they will give you the signs prior to them nipping you or biting you. And if you can read those signs, because then what they're saying is, you're in my space, you're in my space. And then the next thing is, I'm going to bite you because you're in my space and you're not listening to my signals. For dogs, they communicate through body language, everything. So vocal for them is secondary, but body language for them is their primary way of understanding. So if we can, as humans, can understand what they're trying to tell us, then it makes it so much easier to relate to them as well, too, right? So when we do commands, even though we use verbal, I love to always make sure that we have a hand signal as well to go with it, so that because that's how they understand the best. And then lastly, reading a dog's energy. So if your pup is, really tired at that point, we don't want to be taking it for a 2-hour hike after that, because that would make no sense. And again, if your pup is so wound up that they, at that point, you don't want to be taking it for a 2-hour hike either. You want to be actually giving it, something to calm them down in their safe space. So, reading a dog's energy also is important for that, right? For those reasons, right? So, yeah.
Okay, going back to sort of body language and being able to read their body language.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Firstly, body and tail.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially with tail, get confused is that
Hmm.
the dog is, I come home, the dog is barking aggressively at me, quote unquote aggressively, but his tail's wagging.
Yeah.
But he's barking like he doesn't want me there.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, so the bark could be a different, could be an excitement bark as well too, but it could also be that, hey, I'm not feeling comfortable. So the tail, depending on where it's barking, so where it's wagging. So if it's on the top and it's wagging really, really fast, it's like, hey, I'm fixated on something, and I really, and especially if it wags and then it stops. So then it's like, and the way that the pup is leaning forward, it's like I'm fixated on something. And then what we want to do is we want to break that, because that could lead to an escalation at a certain point, because they're sort of at that point where their energy level or there's heightened. If their tail is actually just in the middle, usually a middle tail wagging, side by side, either they can be really fast or it could be, slowly, and their body is loose. That they're calm and they're relaxed. But also if they're making them body really, really small and they got their tail tucked in there, of course, that's fear as well too, right? So we want to sort of look at the whole body, not just the tail and the structure of the body. Ears by themselves, and they're a bit tricky, but you can, if they're up, it's alert. It could also mean that, hey, I'm being playful. It could also mean that, hey, I'm listening. I want to listen to what you're saying. And they sometimes tilt their head as well too when they're listening to you. And all they're trying to do is they're just trying to get their ear closer to because, like I said, verbal for them is secondary. So they're trying to understand, and that's why they sometimes they'll turn their head as well too to listen. And if their ears are in the back, it's fear. If their ears are like just loose and hanging, it's calm. For the eyes, if they're avoiding contact, it's obviously it's fear-based and anxiety. If they're staring at you, with dilated pupils, and they're just giving that stare, it's that, hey, again, you're in my area, and I'm not comfortable, kind of thing. So we want to break that right there before it escalates. If their eyes are like soft and you can sort of see, and their ears are soft, you have to sort of look at the whole thing. It's calm. And then again, a very common thing that we see is whale eyes. And that's something like where you sort of, they're kind of giving the side eye, and all you're seeing is a lot more of the white than you are of the actual pupil. And what that, again, is one of the biggest signs that, hey, I'm not comfortable. You're in my space. I really would want you to kind of move away. And at that time, people, if they don't see it, they're going to come closer. They come closer and then nip. So again, these are signs that if you sort of see them, you'll know, okay, they're not comfortable right now with I'm in their space. I better back off. The mouth. So with the mouth, that's another one that's really tricky. So if the mouth is actually just open and they're panting just a little bit, they're relaxed. If they're obviously they're showing their teeth, again, it's something that it's going to be an escalation. So we want to sort of get them, break that pattern right there as well too, and get them away from that situation. With dogs, especially with fearful dogs, it's fear-based aggression, which means that it's fight or flight. So if they can't get away from the situation, the first instinct is, I'm going to try to lunge and I'm going to try to bite and I'm going to try to make myself look really, really scary. So that's usually very common. And if the pup is jaw is really, really tight, it actually is that they are anxious. So that's why one of the things that is I don't like, I'm not a really big fan of the fact that when they use, head halties or, gentle leads or even muzzles, because a lot of the pups, they hold their stress in their jaw. And if we're actually restricting that and they're already an anxious dog, then it's just going to make it even worse for them. They're going to get even more and more anxious. So we want to try to avoid those things if possible. I mean, sometimes it's necessary, but a lot of the times they're really not necessary.
And going back to sort of the dog giving you all these cues, like the whale eyes and the lick lipping and all that. And I know a lot of people try to pet their dog, get the whale eyes, get the lick lipping. realize the dog is scared, and then the dog growls even. And then
Mhm.
at that point, the person says, no, no growling. Why is it important not to punish them for growling?
Yeah, because that's their human nature. And all they're really doing is that they're telling you, like, I'm not comfortable. So if you're sort of, correcting them when they're trying to explain why that they're not comfortable in the situation, then you're kind of, you're it's a whole about building trust, right? And so if you actually are, saying no to them, and trying to still get into their space, even though they're telling you in so many different things, hey, I'm not comfortable, hey, I'm not comfortable, I'm not comfortable, but you're still doing it, and then you're saying no on top of that. But if you that bond that you're going to be getting it's going to constantly, there's going to be some type of thing that, do I trust you, do I not trust you, do I trust you? And you want them to trust you, obviously, because but you want to build that bond sooner than later. So if you can actually sort of see all that stuff and say, okay, I get it, you want your space, I'm going to move back, then they go, okay, wait a minute, they're listening to me, and so I get it now. So it's all about building trust, and it's all about how you can sort of change and tweak some of these behaviors so that you can actually build a better and stronger bond with your pup.
Yeah. I've also been told that punishing a growl or trying to punish it just essentially teaches the dog, I'm not supposed to do that. Next time, I'm not going to give you any warning. I'm just going to go straight for the bite.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be disciplined for every single time that I try to tell you that I'm not comfortable. So next time I won't even tell you that I'm not, and I'm just going to, yeah, exactly. And that could be a case where, when they say, oh, they gave me no reaction. I mean, they just came out of nowhere. So again, if you sort of listen to what their stories are and how they discipline, then you may figure out that maybe that's why the reason why the dog they went straight for the bite, because oftentimes before that they were disciplined for showing their signs before that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Going into the common behaviors again, probably starting with the most common one.
Yep.
Skittishness.
Yeah.
My dog will not come to me, has no interest. I get up, he runs away.
Yep. So we at that point we want to leave the dog alone. We want to give it a safe space. We want to actually allow them to come to us. And the very biggest thing is giving them a safe space and not being, in their face. We want to talk softly. We want to actually not look at them straight, make eye contact with them, because that's very intimidating for them. We want to look away. And the easiest way to help a skittish dog is kind of ignoring them at the beginning. You're there, you're present. The food is there, the water is there, the bed is there, you're comfortable. But we're not going to invade your space. When you're ready, you come to us, kind of thing. And also going down to their level. So if we're on the floor, we're also not standing right in front of them. We're going to be actually the easiest way to show that you're not intimidating is you turn your back. So if you turn your back on them, that just shows them that, listen, I'm not a threat. That's the biggest way of because even when two dogs are meeting and they're meeting face to face, that's very threatening. So what we want to do is we want to turn our back so that way we're showing, and that's why dogs actually go to the behind, and they smell, because they can get all their DNA from there, and that is the best way of getting a dog to actually interact with another dog. So what we're trying to do is mimic that, and what we're saying is we're going to turn our back, and we can give our palm, and we'll just put our palm behind us, and so that they want to sniff us, they can. But we're going to make ourselves, the least, we're intimidating for them. We can also be on the floor if we want to, do, and we don't have to hand feed. I mean, if they will hand feed from us, that's wonderful. That would be the suggestion. But if they don't, then we can just toss treats and just build that bond until they learn to trust us.
And sort of an extension of that, barking.
Yeah.
And I know in the beginning we talked about all the different reasons why dogs bark. Specifically, I think a lot of barking comes from just fear. someone walks into a room, or the dog was sleeping, someone walks into a room, startles them, they start barking, and they're sort of just in such an aroused state at that point that it's hard to get them to calm down again.
Right. And the biggest thing what you can do at that point is just sort of, leave the room and leave the situation. By standing there and, trying to tell them, be quiet and, and all that stuff. What you, and especially if you're talking loud, for them, when they're barking and you're talking loud, they think, oh, wow, okay, so they're doing the exact same thing. So they think it's a game. And so what we want to do is the best thing we can do when they're showing negative behavior is ignoring them. Because for them, especially if they're bonded to you, that's like, oh crap, they're ignoring me. Like, so that's a really, really good way of letting them know that I'm not happy with what you're doing. So I'm going to just walk away until you stop. When you stop barking, then I'll come back and we can have, then we can continue on. So, but then again, there's ways of stopping the barking, and the best way is deterring, is just, just deterring it and getting them to do something else. So then they're bark, you do something else with them. Whether it's a find it, where you toss a treat and ask them to find it. So then they're looking at the game, and then they forget why were they even barking, right? So it's a way of breaking the chain and breaking that thought process for them, so that and sometimes they get so wound up that they don't even know how to break it themselves. So, and if we sort of leave the room, I mean, if it's a bark where they think that by barking that the problem's going to go away, and we leave, then we're kind of telling them, okay, well, I barked, they left. But we don't want to be doing that. That's why it's so important to find out why they're barking. So if they're barking because they're just excited to see us, then that's great. Then, okay, bark. Now, after that, we ignore them while they're barking. And then when they're calm, then we acknowledge them. If they're barking because they just don't like the male thing, and they're that's the case, then at that point, then it's a matter of just getting the male or whoever that person is that they're barking at to do all the positive stuff with them, so that breaks that cycle as well too, right? So it's one of those things where once you figure out what the cause of it is, then you're able to manage that.
Yeah. And I remember a few months ago, we had talked on our forum about an adopter who was struggling because her dog wouldn't stop barking until he was fed.
Yeah.
And that was another case where it's like he just had to be ignored, because if he thought he was fed every time that he was barking, so that was sort of his reward. I bark, I get fed.
So what I said was, what I told that adopter was that soon as he starts barking, you put the bowl away and you go sit down again. Then you go back again, you try it again, so that, and then every time Benji used to do that. Just to give you an example, excitement barking. So he's excited to see us. He's excited about food as well too. So it's like as if the guy hasn't been fed. Like he thinks, he's not going to get fed again. So every time that he gets so excited because he's so happy to get food, that he'll bark. And so then again, I just keep, whenever that happens, I just go back, I put the bowl away, and it kind of peeves off the other two, because it's like, wait a minute, we're not getting our food, right? So, but that's the thing, is that they have to realize, or he has to realize, that guess what? Barking is not going to get you anything. Being quiet will, though. And then he learns very quickly. So after about the third time, he's like, oh, I better just stop barking and calm myself down. And then I give it to him. And this has been going on now for, 8 years, 7 years. So with Benji. So it literally is a work in progress. So it's not one of those things that, oh, I'm going to stop it in, 2 or 3 sessions. It's a continual thing that you have to work through, right? So,
yeah,
and that's a reality.
That applies to all aspects of training, I would say.
Absolutely.
You don't just do 1 or 2 sessions, you have to keep up with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and let's going on to noise sensitivity. So, again, talking softly. What we do is we also, obviously using things like counter conditioning and desensitization are 2 big things that we use for noise sensitivity. Also just playing soft music so that some of the sounds are muffled. Like at the Humane Society, we use classical music, and we use soft jazz, so that's playing in the background. So the things like things in the kitchen that seem really scary for them may be muzzled out. Noise canceling machines are also really good. Having a fan on, just so that there's stuff that can sort of, buff that noise, really will help them. Also, talking softly ourselves. If we're excited and we're talking, that for them it's like, what's going on kind of thing. So we want to be, understanding of that, and saying that, what, we should be talking softly, and we don't want to be, we want to just kind of make them as comfortable in their safe space as possible, right? So, and allowing them that space, but also being, understanding of the noises, and like, don't be vacuuming when you know that this might be scary, until we do some desensitization prior to those exercises. So.
And sort of in terms of vacuuming and things like fireworks, would you just suggest finding the noise on, say, an iPad and just having it on a really low volume?
Yeah. So at a low volume, starting off, but make sure you have high value for initially. I always say, don't use kibble. Use higher value treats. So I use chicken. I use dehydrated raw food. Actually, that's what I train with. So it's always higher value. If they don't like chicken, then use, I use turkey sausages, butterball. They're also low in fat, and they don't have a lot of preservatives. So if you give them high value stuff, they learn quicker, and especially because you're trying to build that bond with them too. So you want to give them high value stuff initially, just to build that bond as well too, right? So.
Okay. Reversed sleep patterns.
Yeah.
Not just jet lag, but just, oh, hey, this dog was supposed to be very energetic, but now he's sleeping all day. And especially when the human is sleeping mostly.
Yeah.
When the human is when the human is awake. When the human is sleeping, the dog is up and
wild
and exploring.
Yeah. So a couple of things. So sometimes it could also happen because they're scared, and so they'll come out and explore, and they'll eat, and they'll drink when everyone's asleep, because it's quieter there. There's less movement there, so that's okay. If at the beginning, right? So, but if it's a reverse pattern, it's easy just to sort of try to get them to do take them for walks more often, or take them out more often during the day. And then what I suggest is right before, about a couple of hours, do a lot of mental stimulation stuff with them to tire out their brain, so that they automatically are tired, and then they'll sleep a little bit longer and longer throughout the night. It takes about a week for them to usually get back into the regular pattern of it. But if you sort of do a lot of the exercising, and also have a little bit more noise, if in the daytime. So even if it's just putting on music in the daytime and things like that, soft music, just so that they hear the noises and the hustle bustle in the daytime, it sort of makes them a little bit more alert as well too, right? So
agoraphobia.
Yeah. So that actually is where it's about a fear of space, like large spaces. So what that is, especially for dogs that have come, that have possibly been in crates all their lives, or in a place where there's a lot of other dogs, and so they don't have a lot of space themselves to move around. So if we sort of get them, and then all of a sudden we open up the crate and say, okay, we'll that's great, we'll see it go wild kind of thing. For them, that's overwhelming. So what we want to do there is we want to give them an enclosed area at the beginning, so that they have just their own safe space. And then as they get more confident, then we want to actually then give them more space, right? So and as far as even in condos, even just the hallway could also be really overwhelming for them. So for that, we want to also desensitize them to that prior to, so small little bits of introduction, and then with feeding, and then back inside kind of thing. So
touch sensitivities. Paws are a really common one. Top of the head sometimes. Even belly sometimes.
Yep. So and that's where the consent, where I'll talk a little bit more about consent. So first of all, what we can do touch sensitivity exercises, but we have to do it when they come to us. So we're not going to go to them and we're going to start touching them everywhere, because that is going to cause, definitely you're going to get a nip for sure somewhere. So we want to, when they're ready to come to us and they trust us, then what we're going to do is going to have our high value treat in our hand, and we're going to actually, first we're going to start off with the consent. So which is, you take your palm, you show them that this is, I'm going to be touching you, and I'm going to touch you right under the neck. So 1, 2, 3, that's it. Then you sort of see how they react to that. So are they going to move closer to you? Because then it's like, oh, I kind of like that. I want more. Or do they move back? And if they move back, it's like, hey, I'm not comfortable right now with that, so I really don't want you touching me there. So I said, that's fine. But if that's the way to do it, is just three touches, 3 pets where they can see you. If you touch them on their head or their back, there's a very strong chance, because they're not able to see, that they'll reach over, and the first instinct is to nip. So we want to be, and now as far as doing a sensitivity exercise, we want to have high value. We want to touch their paw and feed them, touch their other paw, feed them, touch their side, feed them. And the minute that they sort of, jerk back, it's like, okay, that's it. We're done. We're done. So we know that, okay, they're sensitive to certain areas, and we're not going to be touching them or doing stuff in that area. Right. So, that's usually how we do the exercise for that. But then as far as the collar and the harness go, so the collar is obviously a little bit easier than the harness. So the collar, we would just put on the floor, let them sniff around. Same thing with the harness, let them sniff it around. And if they're coming close and they're showing interest in it, we're going to reward them for every time that they go near it. For the collar, easiest way to do it is you have 2 people, ideally with 2 people sitting on the floor, not in front of them, but on the sides. One is feeding them, while the other one is just sort of slips it around the neck. So they're not intrusive, and they're sort of not in front in their face either. And if they're okay with it, that's great. If they're not, then we're going to cut the exercise short, and we're going to try again the next day. With the harness, it's a little bit more intrusive, so it may take a few more sessions for that. But the first thing is let them smell it, reward, put it over their head, reward, take it off, reward. And then next day, maybe, putting it on and keeping it on for a minute and then taking it off. What ends up happening for them to get really anxious is that we try to, okay, oh, it's over their head now. Let's just clip it on and let's get everything done. And then they might be squirmish and they might be doing stuff, and we're not seeing the signals. And then that's what happens. And then they start getting fearful of the harness. So if we take it in steps, and sometimes it takes about 2 weeks, for them to get, but we want to do it in small steps, so that everything is broken down and they feel comfortable with each and every step.
Do you run the risk of making things worse if you just power through, say, oh, it's over their head, let's just go ahead and buckle it?
Sometimes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
then the next time,
they'll run away.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll hide, and then they may not even want to go for a walk after that, right? Because they're thinking, okay, that means I have to go for a walk. And so it could be a whole different thing. So that's why always see their signals and go according to their signals, and cut it short if you need to, and then try again the next day.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Separation anxiety, also another pretty common one.
Mm-hmm. So for separation anxiety, obviously, I always say that if you are going to adopt, make sure that you have at least a few weeks that you're going to be there with your pup before you have to go out, kind of thing, and always make sure that someone's home, right?
Yeah. But sorry, before we go there, can we just sort of give a quick explanation of what separation anxiety is?
Yeah. So separation anxiety is where your pup is so attached that they feel that if you leave the home, that you're never going to come back. So they get super anxious, and there's different levels of separation anxiety. Some will just sit there and pant and just get themselves so anxious. Some will actually start biting at things and biting at furniture because they just can't cope, and so so that's one of the severe cases where we really have to sort of monitor all that, right? So. But it's the fear of losing the human, and that they're leaving and they're not going to come back. So there's
sometimes even just going to the bathroom, people have issues.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess if they have to go grocery shopping and things like that. So if we plan that, a couple of weeks before that, again, a Kong is one of my favorite things. So what we do is we take a Kong and we freeze it. I mean, they're in steps too. And if they like banana, I always say banana is very calming. So if you can, put the yummy stuff inside and then, top it with some banana and then freeze it for a little while. Licking is calming, and so is the banana. So in their safe space, the first thing is, giving them something to calm them down. So put the music on if they're, used to the music, and you give them their Kong, and then you put your coat on, and you take your keys, and you just go to the door, and then you come back, put your keys away, put your coat away, and come back and sit down. Next day, you do that same thing, the Kong, and then the coat, the keys, open the door, maybe go out for a minute, then come back in, and then come back right in. So what we're trying to do is we're telling the dog that, hey, look at, the steps are going to all be the same, but if you notice that I'm going out and I'm coming back in. So that's in their mind, their whole thing is that if I don't see them, they're not going to come back. So we just sort of have to figure, and if it's a fear of, that even if you go upstairs, same thing, you can do the exact same thing where you leave them with the Kong, put on the stuff, go up a little bit, and then come right back down again, so that you're sort of breaking that pattern of, hey, I'm here, I'm not going to leave you. And so once they understand that, then it's usually a lot easier to leave the house.
What if and this has happened in a handful of cases where the dog, as food motivated as they are, sort of are one step ahead. It's like, okay, I know you're leaving. I know you're using this Kong to distract me, and now I'm not interested anymore.
Yep, which is fine. And to be honest, be persistent. It's okay. You don't have to have it. I'm going to put it there anyways, because that's part of the routine. So again, we're talking about consistency and routine. So we're still going to do that. And just so that, and if the Kong doesn't work, we can do a tea towel. We can do another mental stimulation stuff just to sort of help them with their anxiety, right? So the idea is to help them cope with their anxiety at the same time us leaving, which is also anxious for them. So we want to sort of calm them down before we actually leave, whether it's to leave to go into another room or whether it's leave to go outside. But we want to do it in short spurts. So, 10 minutes, come back, then half an hour, come back. So that for them, they're realizing, hey, she does go out, but then she keeps coming back. So I guess it's okay. It's safe. So that, and also monitoring the fact that, hey, are they destructive? Are they doing anything which they shouldn't be doing? Also, that's another thing that you can also monitor. A lot of them have those nanny cams that you can actually watch through as well too. And so that you know if the dog is settled or not.
Okay. Irregular pottying.
Yeah.
Irregular pottying, yes. Also scent marking, I find is a common one.
Yeah. So, and markings on the other one, so I can do them both and there's a urination one, and so they're all three kind of very similar. So I'll just do them all three at the same time. So basically, if they are, so if they're marking,
there's irregular pottying. There is scent marking and then submissive urination.
Yeah. So they're all pretty much going to be the same thing that we want to do with each one, and that is that if they are doing it, a lot of it's because it's anxiety based. So what we want to do is ignore that behavior, make sure that we neutralize the smell of it, and we try to get them onto the pee pad if that's what they're used to, or if they're going outside, we want to do it frequently. So every hour initially they should be going out, and if they're marking in a certain spot, then what we want to do, or urinating in a certain spot, then we want to also put the pee pad there, so that, and again, if they pee on the pee pad, we jackpot that. If they pee outside, same spot, we take them to the exact same spot all the time, and then and for that, then they have to we jackpot that as well too, right? So once they do it in that spot, we jackpot that as well too. So that, and then if they're marking, we want to give them a small area. We don't want them going around the entire house marking up the house. So we want to just give them an enclosed area so that they're not going to be damaging a lot of the stuff. And again, we're going to ignore the bad behavior, and we're going to reward and jackpot the good behavior. And eventually, you'll see that they'll get more into the good behavior, realizing that it's motivating, and it's treat rewarding. Otherwise, it's ignoring and not getting anything. Also doing some mental stimulation work with them to help with their anxiety as well too, because oftentimes they do it out of anxiety.
Okay. Refusal to eat or drink.
Yeah.
Usually I would say this is more in line with our skittish dogs that are like, hey, he won't eat in the day, but I hear him in the middle of the night munching on his kibble.
Yeah. They'll never starve. They're really smart. But what will happen, we got to give them that time, right? That the only time that they may not eat is if there's some health issues. So we want to give them their time to do that. And if they're eating at night, allow them that to happen until they get more comfortable. So with a lot of more mental stimulation and everything else, they will get more comfortable and they will be able to then start having more regular eating patterns. So
resource guarding.
Yeah. So usually that's very common with food. So, and especially when there's another sibling there as well too. It's like kind of like, this is my food, and kind of thing, or with a toy. So what we want to do is we offer a trade game. So when we offer a trade, it's kind of like if you leave that sock or if you leave that slipper that you're not supposed to have, I'm going to give you something of higher value. So, the thing with the trade game is you're not going to give them, for instance, if they have a bone in their mouth, you're not going to give them kibble as a swap, because they're going to say, well, no, I don't want it. Right. So
that's not worth my while.
Exactly. So, you give them something of higher value. So, say, I'm going to give you a chicken breast kind of thing. So kind of one of those things where you leave one thing and then you'll get something else. And then we also teach them the leave it command as well as the off command, which is that even if you leave it, you'll get it back. But it's just teaching the dog impulse control so that, you leave it, but then you can take it after that. So there's ways of teaching them that. And it's just a matter of just sort of seeing what they're guarding and then working towards that. So.
Okay. I resource guard my food too. I get it.
Okay, there you go. I think we all do.
So that's sort of the end of our common behaviors, but just a few reminders here on what we should be doing and what we should not be doing.
Yeah. So the do's, take things slow, one step at a time. And basically it's their timeline, not ours. That's super important. Give time and space to decompress. And it's, again, their timeline, not ours, where it's not going to say, okay, 2 weeks, they should be decompressed. It may take them a few months, right? We got to sort of go to what they're giving us as signals. Because the end goal is to have a healthy relationship with your pup and for them to trust you. Allow them to choose their own space and respect boundaries. So again, not going to their into their territory, into their space, and allowing them to choose a space. Not that, oh, this will be a good place for you to go, but you'll know what they find safe, because they'll probably run to that on a constant basis, and that's where you should probably set up their little safe space for them at the time. Then create a positive associations. Of course, that's what you want, because you want to build good relationships with your pup. Maintain calm and composed body language and environment. Of course, talking softly. Making sure that we're not introducing too many stimuli, and keeping things very consistent. Establish routine and consistency. That's the last one right there, which is so important. Some of the don'ts is set goals based on timelines, of course, and especially have realistic goals. Hover over them or their space. Dictate and determine boundaries and safe space for them. Allow them to make those choices themselves. Introduce new concepts too quickly. That is what happens when we do. That's where the trigger stacking happens. Is where we're just oh yeah, they can do that. They can do that. They can do that, and then all of a sudden it's explosion, right? So put them into uncomfortable situations. Teach them how to cope. This is really common where they go, what, they're going to figure it out. They hate going for walks. If your dog stops walking at a certain, and you keep pushing them towards it, they won't even leave the house the next day, because they're going to be so petrified. So what you're actually doing is you're instead of strengthening the bond, you're actually breaking that bond between you and your pup. And then they're going to be even more fearful. So then you're going to have to take a few steps back, and then start start, the training again from a more from a, another level where you would have been so much further ahead if you hadn't pushed them. Make fast movements, loud noises. That's common. That if we're wheeling our arms like this and things like that, we don't want to be doing that because it's scary for them, right? So, and then obviously change their schedule. So, 1 week they're with us, next week, oh, we're going on a trip. So yeah, you're going to be with my mom right now. So that's what I'm saying, that for the first little while, very little stimuli, and it should just be the bonding of the environment and their humans in that home.
Yeah, and consistency is comforting. I mean, to know what's coming next. It's like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk at this time. Okay, we're going to do this at this time. There's no surprises.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sort of one final thing.
Yeah.
Walking.
So training. So I'm such a huge advocate of training styles. So of course, I only teach positive reinforcement training. And what that is actually saying is that and it's proven that for every time that they do something positive, we're going to reward them. So it's reward-based training. We're going to reward them for good behavior, and we're going to just ignore the bad behavior. And what that happens is that that way the pup learns to trust us, and the bond is there. It becomes stronger quicker. It's maybe a slower process, may take a little bit longer, but in the meantime, it's good. You're going to have healthy bonded pups. So taking something like this slide into consideration, that if we're talking about loose leash walking, so with me, engagement is so important. So the pup is there, we're engaging, we're talking, and the pup is right beside me as we're walking because he's engaged with what I'm saying. And I'm going to reward them for every time that they're near me and they're looking up at me. And every time that they go ahead and they sort of pull, I'm just going to stop walking. And so that's the only negative thing, is that you're not going anywhere. If you want to really go and sniff that place that you're really dying to go, loosen up the leash, come back, and if they do, we're going to reward them for coming back, and then we're going to go to the same spot, but we're going to walk over there together. But you're not going to pull me to that spot. So, it's one of those things where we're going to allow them to make choices and make the right choice, and then reward them frequently for the right choice. The other approach, which is the balanced approach, which is
quote unquote balanced.
Yes, quote unquote balanced. And that is where, you pull, I'm going to lift up my leash, and I'm going to choke you every single time. The dog, of course, doesn't want to be choked. So what's going to do is they're going to obviously fall back, and they're going to walk beside you. So they've gotten what they wanted. So things like that, choke collars, prong collars, e-collars, those are things, they're easy fixes, but it damages the dog so much. And the aggression and the behavioral problems that come after that are huge, because that dog doesn't know if they should trust you. And oftentimes with pain comes aggression. So, you have to really be mindful. Also, using spray bottles, to sort of discipline them at home if they're doing something negative, or, using marbles in a bottle. I've seen that as well too, where they throw it just to startle them so that they don't do the same mistake again. So these are things that, even though they may be quick fixes, but in the long run, they're really, it's very, very damaging for your pup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you essentially want the dog to do what you ask of them because they want to, not because they're afraid of some repercussions.
Absolutely. And that's why I say that in the long run, you're going to have a healthier dog if you take the positive reinforcement approach. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so we've sort of reached the end here, but we do have a few questions that have come in. I'm going to start. What if I live in an apartment with other pets and don't have many areas for isolation and slow introduction? What should I do?
So you have other pets, depending on what other pets you have. The only thing I could suggest is, if whatever area that you're living in, use gates. Rather, if you can't put them in different rooms, use gates to separate them and see how they interact first. And if they are okay, then introduce them, but always introduce them, from not just, hey, and just meet. there should be some type of boundary before that, just to see if they're sniffing, if they're growling, if they're, showing any type of aggression, because at that point that they're not ready to meet at that point.
Okay. My rescue of 2 months often lip smacks and looks away when I pet her. I stop and let her be, and she turns and moves back towards and lifts her head for more pets. It makes it hard to read the consent part. I assume she's nervous, but still wants the contact. Any advice?
Yeah, so I would still go with the consent. So I would make sure that I do the exact same thing, where I'm going to, put my hand there, and again, 1, 2, 3, and if she comes closer to you, then again, then continue on and do a few more, and then keep showing your hand to the pup, and then keep petting. But if they're looking away, it's a sign of that I am not really comfortable, right? So if she is going to give these mixed signals, then I think the easiest way is to keep asking for consent, and then just take few pets, and then let her be, few more pets, and then let her be, so that way you're doing it in short spurts, and so she's not overwhelmed, and she's also seeing that you're not excessively doing it.
Should you introduce the high value treats at this point, or just focus on the consent?
I would, if you're going to do consent, I wouldn't bribe her with treats at that point. I don't think it's necessary for her to come. If she wants to come to you, she will. Treats can be used for other stuff, for motivating, but definitely, I don't think you need it for this. Excuse me.
Okay. Next question. We adopted a Jindo 2 months ago, and he will be 2 next month. Fun age, teenagers. He has no interest in toys, balls, or simple training like sit. He also pulls me when walking, whereby my body is so achy. He is so strong. I have tried the training techniques I have used in the past, but it's not working. He walks great with my husband, though.
So what I would do is, I guess, ask a couple of questions. Is can you guys both go for a walk together? And then sort of that, so that the husband is there if he's walking well with the husband, even though you're managing that with the waist leash. And then again, the easiest way for pulling is you just got to stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. And depending, you have to have a lot of patience, but it does work. And also engagement is really, really big. So if you're engaged with your pup while you're walking, I talk to my dogs all the time. So I'm constantly talking, so that they're, we're playing games, we're talking. So you want to be more important to them than the environment. So the reason they're pulling is because they're going towards something. So what you want to do is you want to make yourself so important to them that they don't care about the environment. They don't care about the triggers. They don't care about the squirrels. They don't care about any of that stuff, because you are really important to them, and you're going to reward them. You're going to reward them for every single time that they do that. And so I guess the question is, when you're going for walks, are you taking rewards with you? If you are, then what kind of rewards are you taking? Take higher value rewards, so that they are coming. They're not going to pull you. They want to stay near you, because you're going to be talking to them, and you're going to be giving them rewards for every single time that they check in back with you, look back at you. Every time that they come near you, you're going to reward them for that. So there's things that you can do to sort of help with the walk, for sure.
Would you advise that technique where you change directions so that they're not being rewarded for pulling?
Yeah. So stopping is good, or you turn. So what you can do at the if they're doing it all the time is, so as soon as they pull, you just go turn direction, so they're all of a sudden behind you. And then as soon as that they come near you and they're walking beside you, you can reward them right there and then. So you want to reward them always by your leg, and so that they realize, oh, okay, so I'm getting rewarded when I'm here. I'm not getting rewarded when I'm behind her. I'm not getting rewarded when I'm in front of her. So I'm going to be sticking around her. Allow them to sniff as well too, because sniffing actually helps with their anxiety and their stress levels. So oftentimes people keep their dog so close to them and they want to heal, but that's not fun for the dog. You want them to be able to explore and have a loose leash, and there'll be times where they'll pull towards it, just, and it's just a matter of managing that, right? So
Mhm. I think might be the last question.
okay.
I adopted 2 bonded dogs from FKD 3 months ago. One of them is very anxious and barks as soon as we go out for a walk in the morning. I'm assuming this is leash reactivity. I've gone through 2 sets of trainers and even prescribed Prozac, but nothing works. She's still very reactive, even when other dogs aren't around.
So so she's barking because she's going outside. I don't understand. So she's barking because, yeah.
Yep, I think so. She says barks as soon as we go out for a walk in the morning. So I'm assuming that there's reactivity just at some level.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is mental stimulation prior to that, and also then engagement during the walk. Two things that are so easy and they will help so much. Tire out their brain before they go for the walk, and then during the walk you're going to actually engage with them and do commands with them, because what they're doing is they're thinking. So you're breaking that chain. So the barking is going to stop because they're thinking, okay, if I want something, especially if they're treat motivated. And again, high value treats. Every single time that you're out there, you got to bring high value treats for training outside, especially if they're nervous and anxious dogs. You want them to have high value stuff. And ideally, if I don't know if she's walking them together, and if there's an issue with the 2 of them walking together, maybe that one's reacting to the other, I don't know. But if that's the case, then maybe walking them separately as well too, so that you can actually train that pup, with the barking and everything else, because that issue is only to that pup and not to the other one, right? So I usually would start with the one pup alone, and then doing all the stuff with that pup walking.
Okay. I also don't know if it's just the morning walk.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was going to say is probably too soon for the anxiety drugs. I would give it a little bit more time before I getting into any of these drugs. I mean, it's sometimes it's an easy way out, but there are fixes for that without actually having to go on to psychotropical drugs. That's my recommendation.
And medication does take time, and I think it's important for people to remember that it's not a quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think, oh, they're on medication, everything's going to be fine, but
it takes about 6 weeks.
It's really just to allow your dog to calm down to a level that you can perform desensitization and counter conditioning. Right. It's not going to fix the whole problem.
No. Yeah.
Another question. My 4-year-old rescue, who we've had for 15 months, still barks when my husband comes into the room, and will continue barking until I tell her to stop. Okay. How do we stop the barking in a way that uses positive reinforcement? Our dog is very bonded to me, and I believe she thinks she is protecting. Mm-hmm. She is not very treat motivated in general, but especially when she is tense.
So, you got to find out what motivates her. So if it's not, like I said, if it's not the food, is it a toy? Is it something? If it's you, then at that point, then use yourself as the motivator for her, right? So you ignoring her instead of, is probably a big thing right there. So she barks, you ignore. If the minute that she stops barking, that at your husband, then you can then you sort of acknowledge. And also get your husband to be doing all the positive stuff with her. So that bond of that fear, and sometimes it's a male thing where it takes a long time. You just have to be really patient. But if he does all the fun stuff with her, it'll also help that bond as well too. So even if you're going for a walk, go for a walk together, so that the pup is seeing both of you together, feeding wise, get him to be putting the bowls down and feeding, so that way all the good stuff and the stuff that she enjoys with you, switch it around so that your husband's doing that.
Okay. And there's a sort of a follow-up to the individual who had trouble with leash walking, just with herself, not with her husband.
Okay.
Our dog jumps out of bed if she thinks my husband is going to take him out, and starts running to the opposite side of the room. So the wife has to leash him in order for him to go out, for the dog to go with the husband. But it seems like once he's out with the husband, he's a very good leash walker.
Okay. So he's afraid to go out with the husband, but then when he's outside, he's okay. And is
Yeah.
this the one? Is this the one that was also barking with? Or is that a different one?
No, that was a different one. So
Okay.
this one is
Okay. So So if he's okay with her leashing, but not him.
I think the
So
dog is generally afraid of the husband in the home,
okay.
but fine on walks.
Fine
So
on walks. So same thing. Everything that's positive inside is going to be done by the husband. So again, you're breaking that. All the fun stuff. You know, there's lots of mental stimulation games you can do inside, and to tire them out, their brain out, so that their anxiety level is also reduced. And then all the fun stuff is going to be done so that the husband and the pup are able to build that bond.
Okay. I think that is the end of our questions.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, with bonding, another thing, it takes time. Some of our adopters have taken a year or more just to warm up to one person in the household.
Yeah. And, 2 months, I think one of them was at 2 months. That's still really, really early. So again, it's one of those things where our expectations are different from what the pup's reality is, right? So we have to be mindful of that. And I think that's really, really important that, we sort of go on at their level. So if they're barking and if they're afraid at this point, then what we have to do is sort of, break that so that whatever things that are positive that the pup likes, the person that they're fearful of is the one that's going to be doing that stuff with them, so that to build that bond. It's usually with the male. It's it's very, very common. So it's just a matter of, and if you need to be part of that. So for instance, the wife is sitting with the husband while the husband is actually playing games with them. So that way, then this pup's not as scared because the person that he's bonded with is also close by.
Yeah. And I would say just get rid of timelines entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's what makes people get discouraged. It's like, oh, this dog did it in this timeline and this dog did it in this timeline and I'm still struggling.
Yeah.
I think that comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah. Well, a perfect example is Benji. So, I mean, my guy, he's been, 8 years, he's nipped, I don't know how many people. And even now to this day, when our guests come over, I go text me. I take Benji into a safe space. They have to sit down. He comes out. Then I give him a bully stick after he's able to sniff them and bark a little bit, and then he goes into a safe spot. So it's taken this long. So it's not. I'm not asking for perfection from him. It's progression. So with some dogs like him, that's how long it's taken. So you really need a lot of patience, and that's all I can say is that patience, because these dogs have gone through, some of them have gone through so much, and we're expecting miracles where, that's just not realistic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was going to ask a final question of,
yeah, of course.
I think you've already answered it, but just in terms of, as an adopter, as a person that works with rescues, and also as a dog trainer, what's your biggest advice to people that are struggling with a certain behavior?
I would probably say the biggest thing is, first of all, I guess go through steps. Am I using, how am I sort of approaching that situation? Am I being realistic in my goals? Am I being am I able to understand what the dog is trying to tell me? And I'm sort of, pushing through that because my goals are different from what the expectation of that dog are. And then at the same time, the biggest thing is you have to have patience, you have to have time, and you have to have commitment. Those are the three things. So if you have those,
determination to succeed,
100%, and absolutely, there's no quick fixes to it. That's a reality. You've done the first step of actually, rescuing a pup that, is, that's a wonderful thing. And then to sort of, then you got to sort of say, well, I got to put in the time as well too, and the patience, and obviously, to build that bond, everything positive, and just ignoring the negative. That is so important. So,
Oh, one final question
Yeah.
just popped in there. I think
Yeah.
we have time.
Mhm.
Let's see. Um, my rescue mixed terrier always gets very aggressive when coming out of the elevator. Had a bad experience with other dogs. How can how can I possibly make her not so fearful or aggressive when approaching or walking past without incident?
Yeah. So easiest thing is engagement. Again, I think I've said it in the past is if you make yourself, you know, more, you know, engage with the pup, that you are more important to the pup than the environment. I have had reactive dogs that are so reactive, and yet they'll focus on me, and they'll because and that's the thing is if you can train them to focus on you because you are going to be the most important thing for them, then the rest of it becomes just white noise in the back. So it's so super important, and that's one of the easiest fixes is high value treats, and you're gonna you know, mental stimulation is huge. So you know we do that. We do, you know, engagement with the pup where we're doing, you know, games with the pup so that they're always, you know, working towards a task, and they're playful, and they're listening to our voice, and they don't care what's going on around them. And you know what, this is proven, and I've done it with shelter dogs, I've done it with dogs from, you know, rescues, that it does work. So we just got to, you know, oftentimes we, you know, we put our headphones on, or you know, we're just walking with no treats, and we're just sort of, you know, expecting this pup to sort of, you know, figure things out. But we have to sort of guide them, and I think if we are able to do that, you'll find that there'll be huge progress.
Okay.
So high value treats, I just saw that. So boiled chicken, butter. I use butterball turkey sausages, hot dogs. They're low in. I try to do everything with low in fat. I also salmon, cooked salmon, just plain salmon if they like fish. So I use those, and I also use dehydrated raw food. So I use you know, similar to smack. So I use that, so that way you know, they're getting nutrition in them as well as everything else, and they love it. So they work for that, and they think that, you know, they're getting some amazing stuff, and they're actually getting nutritional stuff. So
Yeah. And I mean, it's also a little game of trial and error to see what they
mhm.
work the hardest for.
Steak,
And
you know, cut into small pieces, you know. Yeah. So
yeah,
I had a client actually from Free Korean Dogs, because I think my dog eats better than I do. I said, I know that's true, but that's the thing, because when it works, right? So if the more that you can give them higher value, then that bond becomes quick, and they listen to you because they know, oh, wait a minute, especially for things like recall. Like, you want your dog to be coming back to you every single time. So for something like recall, you want to have the highest value that you can possibly think of, because in an emergency, you want them to come back to you, right? And so that these are things that are just simple tweaks that you can do that'll really help.
yeah,
But always have treats with you, always when you're going for walks, and always engage with your pup.
yeah. Makes me laugh because it's like, oh, I was raised on a dogmeat farm. I was eating rotting human waste, and now I
Yep.
won't get out of bed for anything less than steak.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Benji still gets excited about food, and I'm like, listen, you know, you've been eating they've been eating raw food and
yeah,
dehydrated raw for ages, and it's like the guy thinks he's never going to get fed again, right? So yeah,
yeah.
so,
I
and of
mean,
course, yeah. So, but yeah,
yeah, yeah. Pure Bites make some great ones that are very like small
yep,
and good for training.
yep,
Crumps Naturals makes good ones.
hmm,
Dehydrating your own dog treats works as well because you know what's in it. But
yep,
Crumps and Pure Bites are also one
yeah.
ingredient, single ingredient.
Pure pumpkin, like the pumpkin, just the pumpkin treats are really good as well too. It's good for their tummy. Yogurt's really good, you know, to give them just
Yeah.
in their Kong Greek yogurt, things
And you
like that.
freeze
So,
it. Yeah.
hmm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so many
Okay.
suggestions.
Yeah. Well, we are at the end of the
Yes.
webinar right now. Thank you so much, Madhvi, for letting
Oh,
us pick your brain.
no problem. No problem. Enjoyed
Yeah.
it. So,
Madhvi is her contact information is on the slide. It's also
mhm,
available on our FKD website and on the Heartbeat community. She's worked with a ton of FKD dogs already.
mhm.
Um, And every
Happy-
time I get a call, I'm like, okay, call this number.
Yeah, they're happy to help, could I say. Mhm.
Yeah. Also, Madhvi is just very responsive. I mean, I will text her and then she's right there
Yeah.
in times of emergency. So
Yeah, no
so-called
problem.
emergency. I mean, it's when someone's anxious, they're anxious and
Oh, yeah.
they want sort of guidance and answers.
Yeah, no,
So,
absolutely. So, no, happy to
yeah.
help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. The webinar will be uploaded at some point, but again, thank you, Madhvi. And
No problem.
if anyone, again, just needs advice and needs to contact her, the information is on our website.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to me for, I don't know how, God, for I've been talking. I'm just going to go and have a whole bunch of water right now. So yeah.
Okay, great.
All right,
Have
you
a good
take
night,
care.
everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.